Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Serie Chronicles podcast. That's right. I'm recording the podcast, even though some of you may have spotted I'm currently in Phoenix, Arizona. This is Nicky. I have with me Mina Rzouki. Mina, did you stay up to watch the Super Bowl?
Any excuse to stay up, Nicky. It's like my usual bedtime anyway.
That's true. You never sleep.
No, I'm the vampire. I mean, sometimes I get really embarrassed when I don't know, my neighbor will be like, I don't know, did you not see that at 9 a.m.? And I'll be like, no. How am I supposed to time if I sleep at 4 and I wake up at 10? Those are my hours, unfortunately.
So you were well prepared to speculate about whether or not Rihanna's pregnant.
Oh, I spent the whole time. Nicky, I'm going to tell you guys a real life story. I really wanted a coffee yesterday, but I didn't have any milk, right? And so I thought, God, I should really just go to Tesco because Tesco is literally the end of the road, yeah? And I thought, I'm just so tired. I just couldn't fathom the energy to get up. I was so tired. And then I see Rihanna performing on stage when pregnant. And I'm like, how do people do this? She just made me feel really crappy about myself, you know? When I'm like, God, I can't even get up and make myself a coffee. I was actually contemplating how much it would cost if I hired someone to do this stuff. I think I was born to be rich, and it's just not going that way, Nicky. So it's really upsetting me.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we're just going to share our lows now, Mina. We're going to share our lows. But I've been in a situation similar to that before when I've been at home, and for me it's tea, but I really need milk for my tea. And I didn't want to have to go out and deal with it. And I literally remembered that with the McDonald's breakfast, you can get a milk. So it was if I order something from McDonald's, just some hash browns and some milk, I did. So I didn't have to go out. Oh,
why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, I think you can do it at breakfast time, so you've got to get on it early.
I feel like Deliveroo could definitely get you groceries, right? You know?
Probably. I mean, anyway. I think nowadays you can probably just get someone to deliver milk, can't you, properly?
Nicky, just tell me about the game. How was the game? Was it the best game of your life?
It was good. Do you know, it was really funny, Mina, actually, because, we do this podcast and we talk about Serie A, and I obviously write my column for Guardian on Serie A, and we do other shows on Serie A, and I do most of my work at Serie A. But I used to do a regular weekly column for the Guardian on the NFL, and I used to cover the Super Bowl every year. And I was really surprised when I was there and started tweeting about it. I feel going didn't know you were interested in NFL. I was like, really? Is that a thing that's been forgotten, that I do NFL sometimes? And maybe I've forgotten a bit what it's like to do NFL, but it's Super Bowl week is so crazy. It's such a wacky experience because it's so unlike anything that you'll see or experience in European sports reporting. The way the American media handle access to athletes, access to coaches, access to teams is so radically different. And Super Bowl is just the extreme example of it, because right from Monday through to the end of the week, through to Thursday, you have every day hour-long media sessions with both teams where every player has to be available and the coaches have to be available. And so you get this sort of extraordinary media availabilities with extraordinary numbers of media there. And because it's a Super Bowl, you've got media from all over the world. And it's part press conference, and it always feels like it's part reality show because it's America. And, this year there was some sort of sideshow stuff going on, really fun stuff going on, because I don't know if you knew about this, but there was two brothers playing in the Super Bowl. There was Jason Kelce for the Eagles and Travis Kelce for the Chiefs, and their mum Donna was in town all week, and so she was the star of Super Bowl week with her half and half jackets, with both players' colors in, and all of that stuff. I don't know. It was so fun to be around, actually, for the first time for me since the pandemic, and just sort of remember how energetic a Super Bowl is. It's very buzzy, and it's very, I don't know, it's one of those events that makes you feel excited to be there. And then it was a great game. So yeah, it was a privilege as always to cover it. I had horrible jet lag the first few days when I got here. I think I'm getting much, much worse at this as I get older, long distance travel. And I had an eventful Sunday, not all of which I'm willing to share with the audience. But one part of it was that my very good friend, Erin, who I'm staying with when I'm out here, gave birth to her first baby. And so that was all going on at the same time as it was like, oh, Erin, bye, I'm off to Super Bowl. But yeah, so I'm so happy for her and for her husband, James, who's also a friend. And I'm just so happy that I get to be here. What a treat. I get to be here on top of being here for work to see two of my best friends have their first baby together.
Oh, Nicky, you make things so nice. I thought you were going to talk about the fact that the Eagles were robbed, about all the stuff that happened, about Philadelphia setting fire to their city. But there's a part of me that just did kind of think, was it like a hold? Did the Eagles get robbed?
Well, I was sat next to a journalist who I know for a long time, lovely journalist, and he's a big fan of the Eagles. And afterwards, I definitely got like the full we were once we'd sort of done filing our copy and had finished writing, I got the full this was an injustice version from him. And honestly, watching it in real time, I thought it looked like a soft call. And when I first then saw the replay, I thought, yeah, no, that is a soft call. Because it's a play that decides the Super Bowl, right? If that
exactly.
Doesn't happen, then the Chiefs either kick a field goal, in which case the Eagles can go and win the game, or they have to take a risky play to try and get the first down. And so to me it looks soft. But then Bradbury, the defender who was flagged for the hold, he did say in his post-game interviews, yeah, I did hold, and I was hoping they wouldn't call it, basically. And there's always a lot of that in the NFL. It's interesting. I don't know if there's a good overlap in rules with football, with soccer, as they call it here. I don't know if there's a good overlap of rules that everyone breaks all the time, and that it's just whether or not you push it too far and whether or not the referees give it. Because the NFL is full of rules like that, rules that everyone knows are rules that everyone knows get broken 80% of plays, someone's breaking that rule, but it's kind of allowed as long as they don't overdo it, as long as it's not ridiculous. I suppose it's a bit it is actually a bit at a corner, isn't it, or a free kick when the ball's coming into the box, and you know that everyone's got hands on each other, right? You know the defender's grabbing the attacker. It's just where's the line between grabbing them a bit and getting penalised for holding them or shoving them? I guess it's a bit like that, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, the fact that kudos to him for coming out to say that. I was on the side of Chiefs anyway, but I did feel sorry for them in that moment, and I really like their coach, Nick Sirianni. Anything that's sort of Italian American.
I feel like producer Simon's about to tell us we have to start talking about football, which we should. But I did kind of want to ask you when he cried before kickoff. What was your reaction to that? Because I have to admit, when I saw him crying before kickoff, my first thought was, that's not someone who wins the Super Bowl. You have to be calm. You can't let your emotions be on top of you. You have to be calm. You're the one who's setting the example.
I know, but it's his first big job, right? It's a big moment. It's the Super Bowl. Against the guy that let you go as well. I mean, Andy Reid had his reasons for it, and I get that, but I totally get it. I'm not saying that it's Andy Reid getting rid of him because he wasn't good, but look, I'm not going to date a guy that cries, right? We all know that. I'm the wicked witch, right? Joke. But yeah, I guess it's his first. It's his first. Yeah, I'm sure he's devastated. But I'm sure it's a big moment. I'm just saying, if I'm in charge of it, I don't know if I'd be Mourinho-esque or I'd be this blubbering wimp on the sidelines.
You'd go with it.
I can't believe I made it to the Super Bowl.
I mean, look, I'm an Arsenal fan. I don't mind an emotional manager. Mikel Arteta's all right with me. So I suppose I'm being hypocritical as well. Guys, everyone listening, I'm sorry for all that not Serie chat, but I should let you know that if you are enjoying what you hear, we do sometimes witter on about things that aren't football. We have a 14-day free trial available right now for our Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership. Head over to seriachronicles.com/Patreon and subscribe there. for free, a free 14-day trial you can get right now. Thank you also to everyone for all the great feedback we've had, especially in the last week. Some really lovely messages in the last week, which Mina did a little mini-sode, reading some of them out and responding to them, which was so cool to have you guys sharing, your experiences. We were asking about your experiences of like how you chose the clubs you support and like how you came to those, and that sort of shared experience that a lot of people have of being not from a place but supporting a team. And we loved it. We'd love to hear more of them, so keep those coming if you have been thinking about it. I haven't sent them yet already. Mina, I obviously was at the Super Bowl. I did share a picture of myself watching the Napoli-Cremonese game from the stadium before kickoff. So I was doing my best to watch everything, but I probably didn't see quite as much as I would on a normal week. I don't know exactly where the right place to start is, but a part of me wants to just jump to Juventus, only because we've just been talking about Nick Sirianni and ridiculous emotion, or not ridiculous, heartfelt emotion. And seems like Max Allegri has been letting his overflow a little bit again as well.
Yeah, the whole time as well. All I kept thinking when I was watching all of this unfold was, Simon must be hating this. So our producer Simon was saying that he really just couldn't figure out Allegri's behavior anymore. And that he was just always this man that was always cool, calm, and he'd lose his rag sometimes, but overall always behaved correctly on the sidelines. And all of a sudden, Allegri's become this guy that's like going mental and yelling at fans for booing Moise Kean and, being upset about Paredes coming on. Although, let's be honest, I get that. But either way, this behavior has not gone down well for Simon. Although, I don't know, I think he's trying to change his opinion. Now, lo and behold, I went the next day and social media was filled with, that's my coach. Yes, brilliant coaching. Look at this passion. Look at this desire. And all I kept thinking is, oh my God, the guy's morphing into Conte. Like, let's get rid of him. I guess I'm a little bit like Simon. I don't like this kind of behavior. But I do want to bring this to you because there was a match between West Ham and Chelsea in which there was a really terrible call. And afterwards, they were asking Graham Potter how he feels about it, and he didn't throw a fuss about it. And they said, this is why he's never going to be a Mourinho, or he's never experience the success of a Conte or a Mourinho, because he does just not even discuss this or try to turn it into a moment where you can have a siege mentality. So to be a top coach, is that what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to go a little bit crazy on the sidelines to show passion and evoke those kind of emotions?
So I think it's actually a really interesting conversation around this, isn't there, about like how you have to handle yourself as a coach. And I want to sort of stress, because I feel like maybe I've been too mean in that Sirianni conversation. I'm really not someone who's like a policer of people's emotions in football. And I think one of the sort of most sort of eye-rolly things I ever see is when people say, oh, did you see that club making such a big celebration over whatever it might be, oh, they just won one game. Oh, they just finished in the top four. Oh, even with Roma in the Conference League, some sort of people going, oh, they only won the Conference League. Do you know what? People can celebrate anything they want, however they want. If it's a win, then they're enjoying it. And that's kind of the whole reason we like sports, is because sometimes you get to have those awesome days where you're enjoying it and your team is winning and it feels good.
Is that because you're an Arsenal fan and you guys celebrate everything?
Well, I mean, look, between recent managers that Arsenal have had, Unai Emery was not easy for me to sort of connect with, which didn't mean he couldn't be a good manager. He could have been a good manager. He has been a good manager at other clubs. I don't think he did he quite made it click at Arsenal. But it does, I do find it easier to connect to Arteta when he's sort of feeling it in the way that you're feeling it as a fan. Now, whether or not that makes him a better manager, that's a different question. I don't know. Like that's up to the players to tell you whether or not they respond more or less to someone who's like that. But the fact that he's passionate and bounces on the sideline and wants to sort of run up and down and shout a lot. I find that personally as a fan, not a thing that I'm going to object to. But I think I probably would have, my feeling would be that the same as some fans will connect to that and some fans won't, you probably have to make sure you've got a group of players that will respond to that and some won't. And I think, yeah, we could talk about Ancelotti, who's that epitome of sort of calmness and never loses his cool. And I think that seems to play so well when you put him in context like Real Madrid, and it's a group of ridiculously elite players. And he's just sort of able to, by staying calm, just remind them that, look, we've got this, guys. You're all good enough. We don't need to panic in situations. But perhaps then when he went to a club like Everton, it wasn't the right mix. And you did need to have someone who could be a bit more urgent for a team that didn't have that natural sort of talent advantage that it had over other teams. So I guess maybe there's some horses for courses in there as well. And
I agree with that, because I still think sporting director Monchi is one of the best sporting directors. But being one for Sevilla, Simon is about to fall on the floor after that comment. Being in charge of somebody like Sevilla is a big team, by the way. I just want to make that clear. Yeah. But sort of maybe taking the step up with the Roma side that was really trying to push at the time, you know, and be recognized as one of the big boys. It's kind of different to be in charge of a team that's trying to do well and perhaps win the Europa League and you know, acknowledging the fact that they'll never be in a Barcelona or a Real Madrid. And it's different to be in charge of a club like, that's a bigger club. Let's say if you asked me, you know, would you want him at Juventus or would you want him at Milan or Inter? No, because it's a very different type of job. Because you're no longer identifying great talents that could be something. Like somebody who's in charge of Atalanta is charged with finding great talent, like buying a Rasmus Højlund from Copenhagen, or looking at Mola Lookman and seeing if you can, you know, benefit from the teachings of Gasperini and turn these guys into the brilliant players that they are, and then sell them for more. It's a very different skill in unearthing great talent to knowing which player makes a great dressing room. The psychology required, though, you know, it becomes more than just finding great talent. It's about, do they have the mentality required? Can they be a hindrance or a brilliant thing for the dressing room? So on and so forth. So I think that you're right. It's different horses for different courses. But personally, for me, as somebody who's always supported a team that's considered a big club, I like a snobby attitude. I don't want someone who's screaming, because I feel like you need to act like you've been there. And the one thing that everyone always remembers from Sir Alex Ferguson is, come on, guys, it's Tottenham. That's his most famous quote. It's like, that's the best way. Like, it's not, oh my God, you need to work. It's none of this madness, because it's like, we're Manchester United, recognize who we are, recognize who they are, and that's all I need to say. And I, like, that kind of speech for me is so arrogant and it's disgusting if it's on a human level, but as a football level, I love it in every way, shape or form. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, I would hate it if my coach was going crazy and like yelling, because I'm just like, dude, like this, you know, we're not like, I don't know, we're not some, you know, and you can tell like about the even teams fans who come at you when you sort of get upset or say something about their teams. The ones who are like a Manchester United who are used to winning all their lives are just like, oh, whatever, you know. But there's others that will just start nitpicking everything, like Lichtsteiner was so mean or something, and you're like, guys, like I don't know what to tell you, you know.
So what I'm hearing is you don't like this new era of Allegri, who is not being snobby and is shouting and screaming.
Yeah, but right now his team is trying to avoid relegation. So I guess that is kind of where he is at the moment. So maybe he's just doing... Look, it's a period of time where you need to unite, and he's trying to get a reaction. Yeah, I don't love it, but maybe that's what is required right now.
Mina, do you know, I thought it was fun that Allegri finally put Di Maria, Vlahovic and Chiesa on the pitch at the same time. I don't have much more that I feel like I particularly need to say about this game, but I was wondering how you feel right now about the other side of this. Vincenzo Italiano, it's not actually going great for him at the moment. He's the manager who I know we've both sort of praised in the past, but Fiorentina are 14th right now. I think they've got 1 point from the last 5 games. Is he losing the grip on this situation?
No, it's very difficult to say this because it's really bothering me because the team is actually playing really well. And Jovic actually had a couple of really good chances towards the end. In general, they're still a very good team to watch on the pitch. And they create good opportunities, but unfortunately, they just don't have the players right now that convert those opportunities into real goals. Whether it's Ikone or Cabral or Jovic, which we've seen has been a little bit disastrous, there's nobody there that you can genuinely depend on. And it's a shame that they lost Vlahovic, because Vlahovic in that team right now is a team that's pushing for European places. But without a striker that can really convert right now, they're just a side that's kind of, unfortunately, not making the most and starting to really find themselves in terrible situations. Actually, somebody did ask us about, let me just... Simon just sent that to us, but basically Anthony Kennedy was saying that he's loving his Tifosi status. And can you please walk us through why the ref went to the screen to disallow La Viola's level? I'm so sorry. Was it not a pure line decision? Thank you. So obviously technology dominated this game because we only knew that Rabiot scored after the watch signaled for the referee and Juventus had scored a goal. Vlahovic then scores another one and that's ruled offside by a fraction, a hair, which is because of the semi-automatic offside that they've got powered. Now, when it came to Castrovilli's goal cancelled, it was apparently to do with the fact that Ranieri and where he was on the pitch brought down Locatelli, who inadvertently, because he was brought down, delivered an assist to Castrovilli, who then scores the goal. So the referee was then called over to judge whether or not he thought Ranieri had interfered enough with play to make it an offside ruling. So that's why it was the decision was up to him. And he decided that he did and decided to call it off. Allegri at the end just said that, he just wants goals like that to be ruled to give the benefit of the doubt to the striker. I agree. I think right now there should be something about daylight being the difference maker between an offside goal or not, rather than just, whether or not you have longer hair or an armpit here or there. It's just ridiculous at this point,
Yeah. I'm going to defer to you on this one, Mina, because it's one of those instances I feel like being at Super Bowl, you would have seen much more than I did. So, but I agree with your sentiment on sometimes you just sort of look at the margins of these offside calls and you think, come on, like we really. But I suppose you have to draw a line somewhere, and it's where it's drawn right now is there. I think we move on from this game because I think the game of the weekend was. I mean, disagree with me if you want me, but I think the most interesting game of the weekend is probably Lazio 0, Atalanta 2 on Saturday night. This was just another of those times when you just watch Atalanta and depending on your mood, you either think, oh my goodness, how wonderful Gian Piero Gasperini always does this. Or sometimes you think it's almost annoying how good they are at finding these players out of nowhere. Because I was watching Højlund, in this game, and Rasmus Højlund, and just thinking again, like, where have you come from? Like, what's your deal? How are you suddenly playing like yet another game-changing player that's come through this Atalanta system? So direct with his running, so fast, so explosive. Really, really. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but looks like the real deal when you see him play like that. And yeah, this team that didn't have a centre forward, that was probably the single biggest difference between the team that was making the Champions League and going further than any Italian team did for a season, and the team that was perhaps faded since then. We all talked about Papu Gomez. We know Josip Ilicic, of course, had his problems and then left. But not having a goal scorer to pick up the slack from Duvan Zapata was the thing that Gasperini talked about. And Højlund's headed in that direction, it feels like. Obviously, Lookman also is getting the goals, but I just thought in this game, Højlund was the one for me, and playing in a really sort of, in that properly like a striker, whereas Lookman, I think, roams a bit more.
Yeah, I think that it's especially noticeable when it's juxtaposed against the poor play of Immobile, can we say? It's not like he had 1,000 chances, but he did sort of like waste 2 really great ones. And I just feel like right now Immobile is not being Immobile at all. So I don't know what's going on. Meanwhile, Atalanta, I thought it could have been 10-0 by halftime. I really did. Like it was like I was tired. I was like, because these guys are break. Do you know what I mean? Like I couldn't breathe at that moment in time. I was like, can you imagine playing in this game against these guys that are all just like it almost feels like one's got like a regular grocery store battery installed and one's got Duracell. Do you know what I mean? We should be sponsored by Duracell at this point. But it's just Atalanta. 39% possession, 23 shots, 10 on target. Honestly, I thought it was 20 on target at that point. But Provedel, I mean, really, he kept Lazio like as much as he could in the game. And Musso, the one time that he was required to be there, was also insane and made a great save. But it was about the goalkeepers and, like you said, Lookman and Højlund. Like I don't know where they find these guys from. And I was upset with Gasperini when he was getting rid of Miranchuk and Malinowski. But I get it now, because it doesn't matter if it's Paco Gomez or Ilicic or the guy down the road. You just make it work with anyone that you've got. And they are Scalvini, like crazy good. Scalvini is crazy good. And he's 19 years old and he plays with the kind of confidence you do not see at that age. Like it is phenomenal the way that they press, their ability to hustle you into submission, the rage with which they cover you it's wonderful to watch. This is honestly like an Atalanta that you thought at the time they had a great generation, but no, it's clear Gasperini is clearly the best coach in Serie A other than Spalletti.
I think you really, like you said a word there, Mina, that I think is like really the important one for me. It's the confidence. Because that's what I was feeling with Højlund in this game in such a big way. And I was just checking the numbers there while you were talking. And I saw he had, according to Opta's numbers, he had 9 successful dribbles in the match. And it's just like, where did you find this audacity? You're 20 years old. You're 20 years old. Where did you find this sort of absolute like self-belief to go run a top division defense like that and back yourself to beat them over and over again because you're doing it? And I think that's something that marks apart the really great players, right? It's what Mbappe did as a teenager. It's what Erling Haaland did as a teenager. And to be clear, I'm not putting Højbjerg in that, sorry, I don't know why I keep saying Højlund in that company just yet. But that's part of the puzzle, right? Part of the puzzle of being great is having that self-belief that you're willing to take yourself to the next place. And he's got the self-belief, it feels like to me. And he's got the pace and he's got that ability to play in a very direct way. So I find him really exciting. And I do think that's such a big part of the Gasperini success. Is we talked about it for years with Gasperini, right? Like it's that whole, the basic idea is trust your players in one-on-one situations. But it's one thing to say to your players, off you go, good luck, here's a one-on-one situation. And it's another thing to make your players believe they're going to win those one-on-one situations. And that's the magic. Like that's the bit that he does that he does so effectively that I'll never probably quite get to the bottom of. He makes all these players who can then go into another club and maybe not play as well, come from a different club where they haven't played as well, when they're in Bergamo, or at least playing for Atalanta, because this was an away game, they just seem to believe it. They seem to like think, okay, yeah, I can do this. And I think that's got to be at least a good part just about how good that coaching staff is at pressing the right buttons and making the players feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's really admirable about this Atalanta side is the fact that they didn't start the season playing this way, that they have the ability to play in 1,000 different ways. The fact of the matter is that they started the first half like driving at 90 miles an hour. I mean, it was just non-stop. And in the second half, they concentrated on doing things right to not lose possession. They then brought on Demiral and made sure that they locked up the defense. And they never looked like they were tired. They never looked like they were off the pace. It wasn't like, oh, we've given everything in the first half and now we're wrecked. It always looked like they knew exactly what they're doing. They know how to control. The first half of the season, we saw them closing patterns of play, playing a more defensive game. Now we're seeing them attacking. The balance that they shows you they're the one team that I can honestly tell you that it never depends on who they buy. It's just about what they do with those players. Their ability to nurture talent is something I've never seen, which almost makes it funny how much we all look and watch the transfer market when you see a team like that. And it's like, regardless, whoever plays with them, everyone seems to always be interesting and brilliant. Even the ones that you would just never want to buy, like necessarily go for yourself, do such a great job for them.
Definitely. Really, probably like the in a weekend that was short of great performances, I thought Atalanta were the one team that really stood out for me this weekend. But in terms of sort of, I guess, not just this weekend, but results in general, I want to take us from here. I don't know if this is where you were expecting me to go next, Mina, but since we're all talking about Gasperini, I just think it's such a similar story because he's a Gasperini disciple. I want to go to Monza quickly and talk about the fact that they are still the only unbeaten team in Serie A in 2023. Not even Napoli managed that because, of course, they lost at the start of the year to Inter. They are up into the top half of the table now and beat Bologna at the weekend just 1-0, but 1-0 away to Bologna, who I think had picked up 10 points from their previous 5 games. It's really impressive stuff that Raffaele Palladino is doing. He's talked about Gasperini before and seeing him as a mentor, but Palladino, because we've talked about him a bit on the podcast before, I sort of feel like maybe we haven't really like fully told that story of him taking over as manager at Monza. And you know, he was coaching the youth team. I think everyone knows that bit, and when they got rid of Stroppa, who got them promoted to the top flight, Berlusconi and Galliani promoted him, and Galliani gave his whole speech about how, we want this to be like our Arrigo Sacchi, like we did it in Milan, we put some faith in someone they didn't see before. But, you know, he didn't even have his UEFA Pro license at that point. And so, like, literally, like, he wins the game against Juventus in his first game in charge. Then 3 days later, Coverciano say, yep, we're accepting you onto our course for pro license. But I heard him talking recently about having sort of met Marcelo Bielsa there as well at Coverciano during his course there, and Bielsa sort of seeking him out because he'd heard about his story and grabbing him, taking to one side and giving him all this advice and saying how he loved Bielsa's talk about gambetta, like the idea that dribbling was everything in football. And I suppose just thinking about Atalanta and how effective that dribbling game was for them again in this weekend, it made me think about Monza as well. They don't do it like Atalanta do it. This 7-game unbeaten run is not a signal they're about to break into the top 4. They don't play at that level yet. But they do keep getting results. And I thought it's almost, I don't know if you saw this goal, Mina, but I'm sure you did, but the Monza goal, I just thought it was like the most Andrea Petagna moment I can imagine. Because Petagna, I love him. He's got all this good energy. He's like such good vibes. He's obviously a good teammate and everyone loves him. And sometimes he looks like a top level striker. And on the goal, he does this really neat turn to lose the first defender. He comes back inside. And then it's like, he has these moments where he forgets that what he's supposed to do next is get your feet ready to shoot. Because instead there's like 2 players I can run into. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to knock you off the ball over here. And knock you off the ball over here. And then the next thing you know, the keeper's on you and you haven't got the shot anymore. But then the ball, in this case, broke off to the side and Giulio Donati there, the fullback, came in and scored it. And that was enough to win the game. And I don't know. I sort of wanted to go from Udinese to Monza because I see the link in those 2 stories and because I just think Palladino's doing amazing work.
Did you say Udinese?
Did I say Udinese? I'm sorry, jet lag's hitting me hard. I don't think I meant to say Udinese. Whatever I meant to say.
But I do, because we were talking about good coaching and we went from Gasperini, who is a disciple. You were talking about disciples of great footballers.
Yes, I wanted to go from Atalanta to Monza because of the link from Gasperini and to Palladino, who has stated him as someone he wants to be like. And I just thought, that was a natural link in my head when I was leading us from one game to the next.
No, I think it's amazing because sort of the way that I saw it is that it's very hard to predict Serie A this season. I don't know which games teams will win and which games they'll lose. It's one of those like where Sampdoria, I genuinely think, is the worst team in the world. Can sometimes pull out a result and you're like, what just happened? But under Stroppa, Monza were the only thing that you could safely say we're always going to lose. So it was like, for me, it was like, yeah, definitely going to bet on that because I know Monza will lose, you know. And then under Palladino, it's like they flipped entirely. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I love Rovella and Sensi and Machin in the middle. I feel like there's always this duality of understanding what needs to happen in midfield. I think Pablo Mari at the back has sort of used his experience and turned him, you know, the club has sort of really held on to him and turned him into a leader and allowed him to shine and to, you know, helped him get over the experience that he had, which was rather traumatic, to be honest with you. Pessina, finally thriving in the role, you know, another one of those players that I always thought one day was going to be really special. Not sure he's going to be as special as the way I thought certainly Sensi would, but again, lots of technique, you know. When they were putting this team together, there was a lot of money spent and you wanted to see those results. But Palladino seems to have hit his stride both tactically but also as a man manager. I feel like the team's a real team, and I think that kind of matters. To beat Bologna at home, a physical side that really is very difficult to beat at home, even if they're not technically brilliant. I think it just goes to show you really honestly, Italian coaching is pretty great, isn't it? When you think about it, like there is a lot of hope for the future.
Well, that's another of Palladino's things he likes to talk about is, you know, he thinks sometimes clubs recycle managers too often and they should take chances on young coaches like him. And I suppose there's no better way to prove that point than what he's doing. So that was Monza. Why don't we get to the league leaders, Napoli Cremonese. As I said, I watched this game from the stadium, Mina, from State Farm Stadium in Arizona, which was a fun experience. Cremonese, you talked about teams that you can sort of rely on. I mean, Cremonese are the team I guess you can still rely on in Serie A never to win. Their bottom 22 games, 8 points. I think this was never likely to be an upset, although, of course, Cremonese have knocked Napoli and Roma out of the Coppa Italia. Those are not first choice teams, so you don't expect it in these situations. They did still dig in for a while, right? That first goal from Kvaratskhelia was in, the 21st minute, and then they didn't score the second till the 65th, so there was always that possibility that things could go differently, but I don't know about you. I never thought this could be anything other than a Napoli win.
Yeah, it's really interesting because sometimes you listen to these people who talk about Manchester City and why they're so dull to watch. And I never knew whether it was because it's Pep or like my reasons for it, or whether it's just simply because you don't always want to watch a team win. But to me, Napoli have become that team. It's like you just know they're going to win. And if it's not now, it'll be in like 10 minutes time. So, but it's almost like... I sort of feel sorry for Cremonese. They tried in many ways to stop Lobotka from orchestrating everything going forward. But there's just so much you can do to stop the unpredictability of Kvaratskhelia and to stop Osimhen being Osimhen and Di Lorenzo. You know, for so long I have talked about how wonderful Calabria is and I felt like he was underrated. And I never honestly talked very much about how Di Lorenzo is really, he's had an outstanding season. He's man of the match against Cremonese. And he has been man of the match on so many different occasions this season, frankly speaking. So he is right now the best right back in Serie A, Italian right back in Serie A. And so props to him, and I want him to be recognized for that. But really, I mean, 15 points ahead now. I think we can honestly safely say they won't muck this up. It's 15 points.
Yeah, I was enjoying Luciano Spalletti sort of talk about, because some journalists, I think, said something about the number of wins left that Napoli need. And he was going, we need 13 more wins. Are you honestly going to tell me like 13 wins is easy? Like, and like the thing is, first of all, I think they probably will win 13 more games because they're just that much better than everyone else right now. But also, like, you don't need to win 13 more games because the rivals around you are going to keep dropping points. And I guess, yeah, we could sort of go to that, Mina, if you want. Like, we're recording this right after Sampdoria against Inter. And I mean, what a slug that was. And Inter, I think I saw an Opta stat for this. It's like the third time in, I can't remember how many years it is, third time in not many years that they've managed to have like 25 shots in a game and not score.
You're surprised? I mean, it's exactly their journey.
Do you know what, actually? Do you know what, Mina? Actually, I'm going to indulge my Arsenal-ness today and say, like, this Inter team, I feel like they're struggling with a thing that I used to think Arsenal in the later Wenger years did a lot, which is just having sort of reached this point of presumption, because they're good enough to win this game.
So?
They're good enough to beat Sampdoria. Yeah, they're good enough. They've beaten some really good teams this season. It's just that they assume it's going to happen without putting the work into it. And so they don't put enough work into it and realize that really late in the game, too late to fix it. If they approached every game with the attitude that they approached that Napoli game at the start of the year, I think we'd have a very different season going on. I just thought this team, it doesn't know how to start a game with the right mindset.
You know how we were talking about Lazio and Atalanta? And Atalanta had, 23 shots in that game, 10 of them were on target. Now, Inter had 25 shots, 5 on target. It's not enough. In the Champions League last season, they had the most shots of any other team and had one of the least amount of goals in the group stage. And I just feel like I understood it at the time, and I thought, Lukaku played today. I thought he was good. Actually, I wouldn't have taken him off, to be honest with you. I didn't think that Dzeko did enough afterwards, and I probably would have kept him on. But it's kind of Lautaro Martinez or bust, and that's what I'm feeling right now. And I just feel like either he comes up with something, otherwise Di Marco, I thought at this point I was going to throw my shoe at him. Yeah, I mean, I think that he had 15 chances, and I don't know why his shot would never, it wouldn't even be on target. It was just always wayward, which is really, frankly, annoying to watch. I think they create so many opportunities. I think they're offensive-minded when they want to be. There is just, Çalhanoğlu maybe didn't have the best game of the season, but he's a great player. The whole team is fantastic. I don't know if it's about the work, but it's like they lack urgency. They lack this desperate desire to prove something. And I don't know why. I feel like Inzaghi has all of that on the sideline. It's like he's like a walking ball of intensity and madness. And you see Barella having this anger that he expresses, and they have him and Lukaku have this tete-a-tete because he's angry that Lukaku fumbles or doesn't do right when scoring a goal, misses a chance. And you think there's enough there, but it can't just be him. There's got to be quicker movements. There's got to be more of a desire. There's got to be a hounding, and that I don't know why they just don't have it. I don't know how you could have lost it since Conte, if that makes sense, because that's who they were under Antonio Conte. I was, for me, they were not playing the kind of football, but that doesn't really matter as long as you win, right? And this time around, I think as a team, they can produce so much beauty, and they have so many better patterns of play. And tactically, they're so fun to watch when they want to be. But there's just no hunger. And I just don't know why.
Yeah, I suppose there's a possibility that part of it is almost because Napoli are so far ahead, right? They've just got to that point where it's the players don't even believe they can be caught anymore. And that has some impact. But you know what?
Do you think so?
Inter are not safe in the top 4 yet, so you should still have motivation to make sure you get that sorted out before you can start worrying about anything else. Speaking of that top 4 fight, Milan finally out of their run without wins. They went 7 games without a win, but they beat Torino on Friday night. Olivier Giroud with the goal, Zlatan back on the bench as well, as a positive note. Didn't come off it, but was, there. So maybe we'll see some Ibra before the end of the season. I'm pretty sure he's not registered for the Champions League squad, so I don't think he can play against Dortmund on Tuesday. Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. Tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. I will be on Stan Sports in Australia for that game. I've just lost track of what day of the week it is.
When are you coming back?
I'm not actually going to be back in England until the 20th, but 21st.
Oh, it's a really long time.
20th. Yeah, I'm doing a bit more work out here, and then I'm also going to take a few days of vacation and see some people. So, yeah, I think if you come all this way, especially since, as we've established, I can't handle jet lag, I felt like it was worth spending a little bit extra time in here and see people. But I'll obviously be working, like I said, actually most of the time I'm here. Mina, I don't know if you have anything particularly you sort of desperately want to say about Milan-Torino. I didn't think it was a very good game, but obviously it's a good result for Milan. I'm almost more interested in how do you think things are for them going into that Tottenham game? Do you think, given that prior to this it was 7 games without a win, do you have any confidence that they can do this, that they can get the win over Tottenham?
Well, it's Antonio Conte, right? He doesn't do well in Champions League, so that's kind of the only thing that you hold on to. But frankly speaking, look, I was really thrilled for them because it started to get really bad at this point. And I was worried that this was going to be like a never-ending streak of just losses after loss. And look, against Inter in the derby, I understood what they were trying to do. I know they got a lot of criticism of it because it was just purely to defend. And I get that when you're just conceding goals left, right and centre, you need to re-establish your pillars, your basics in football, and then find your balance, you know. And for them, sort of establishing their pillars meant that they just didn't really have any offensive talent in that game and really didn't do anything going forward, but just try to stop Inter. But I felt like in this match, they tried to show you sort of the other half of it. Theo did a little bit better than he's been doing recently. Giroud obviously got the goal. Torino played really good, but they have a similar problem to Fiorentina in that they're just not cynical enough up front. They just don't have a great goal scorer. But otherwise, I do think they're actually a very good team. But here's the thing that really irritates me, right? Because you watch Spurs and you think, okay, so you managed this brilliant 1-0 victory over Manchester City, and you did so by your ability to be brilliant in the transitions. You know, very, very Antonio Conte, right? You know? And then you go up against Leicester City, who are very much in this style of play, not too dissimilar to the way that Milan used to be. You know, aggressive, hungry, kept going forward, and they just fell apart entirely. And I think you put Leao against the midfield that's without Bentancur, without Højbjerg, and you love
Don't you mean Højlund? No, she doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
She doesn't. My brain's just being an idiot. I'm just being silly.
And I think maybe Leao can do something. I mean, he had a terrible game against Torino. And this is the thing about him. You know, we said maybe he stopped being inconsistent, but I feel like that boy will always have this inconsistency, at least for now, while he's developing for at least a few more years. I think he will always be a little bit inconsistent. I don't know. But I do think they have enough. I'm worried because this new style of play where they mirror the opponent is not going to cut it against Spurs.
Well, they've swapped to this back 3, haven't they? Which I assume is going to hold in the game against Tottenham. And, you know, I think after that 5-2 defeat to Sassuolo, it's just been a clear decision from Pioli to say, you know what, like nothing else matters but fixing the defence. And once we fix the defence, we can go from there. They obviously still lost the next game to Inter 1-0. We talked about that on the podcast. It was a horrible game of football. But this game, you know, I didn't find it, again, that great of a spectacle, but they were solid. They didn't concede a goal and and that was enough to win off. And I suppose they might take that same approach to the Tottenham game, and perhaps that's the approach they need, frankly, for the Tottenham game. Because I think if they play the sort of open game that they tried to play in the group stage against Chelsea, obviously didn't go well back then. I think the defending has got worse since. So yes, probably an open game wasn't going to end well for them against Tottenham. Whether or not this one will, I don't know. I completely agree with you that this was probably the best game we've seen from Theo Hernandez since the World Cup. He's been dreadful since the World Cup, though, so that's not a high bar. But he was a lot better in this one, and it's definitely a good thing that Leao has been reintegrated after those 2 games when he dropped them. But I don't know. It still feels like this team is not. It's so far from the best version of this team.
Yeah,
that's where I'll put it. It's so far from the best version of this team, and I do tend to think at the moment, with that financial gap that exists between Serie and the Premier League, the Serie A teams need to give you the best version of themselves to hang in these games. And I'm not sure I believe it can happen, but I've been wrong before.
They have the hardest matchup too, because you sort of, you hope that Inter can do it against Porto. At least the Inter that's shown up in the Champions League has been one that I've laud. So I hope they will do it, and I feel confident that they could. And I'm confident, obviously, of Napoli beating Eintracht. Spurs is a hard cookie, but luckily they have their own problems. So Benacer and Tomori could be back. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because I really need listening to, because I've had to do a few Champions League shows, and hearing a few of them say, well, when was the last time Italy threw a real contender other than Juventus, and we know they're out. And I just got really angry, because I was like, Napoli's the best team in Europe, for goodness sakes, and then to knock out Barcelona, like, who are you disrespecting, you know? But I'm really keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, let's hope for the best. And yeah, the home leg first will be an interesting chance for Milan to put their best foot forward. The only team of the European teams actually that we haven't mentioned yet is Roma, who of course did draw 1-1 with Lecce. I'm going to just be totally transparent and say that in amongst Super Bowl week, this is a game that I really just did not see at all. So Mina, I don't know if you have anything to tell me about this game that is important, other than, you know, it's not a great result for Roma, obviously.
No, I mean, there's Wijnaldum was allowed to come on for a little bit. Oh, yes,
I did see Wijnaldum was back. That's great.
I know. What I didn't understand is that this Roma side is clearly not really... You know what it is then? My feeling is that Jose Mourinho is used to dealing with very big clubs, right? And so his style of play with very big clubs is to basically make sure that the defense is great, and then you have enough quality up front, because you always have great players when you're in a big club, to make the difference on an individual level. Really not too dissimilar to what Allegri does, right? So it's kind of like, you just do what you do, and I'm going to rely on you guys and make sure that I shore up the defense and you all perform as a team and have the mentality going forward. But you can't really do that with Roma, because right now what you feel is like the entire attack is dependent on maybe Tammy Abraham and Dybala can do something. So there's just not enough of a group movement in creating an attack. Again, not too dissimilar to Juventus, right? Except not with the same level of talent. And I do feel like defensively they're a team that make the difference, and they're good in the basics of football. They have a strong defense, they can score from set pieces, they have the wild card in Dybala. So in all the things that you would expect them to be good at, they are good at. They're just not a team that can, I guess, solidify a great win against teams like Lecce sometimes. Like, they will come up with these frustrating performances in which you just think you should be able to beat them. But there's just sometimes this lack of quality from them. And again, when you don't make any substitutions till the 83rd minute, it kind of drove me a little bit crazy. Like, you know, El Shaarawy is the guy who basically turns it all on. And then I just feel like waiting until the 83rd minute. But then I also think, what was going to happen in the 83rd minute? Because the players that you're going to bring on... like, Belotti is not really going to change anything. Sorry, I'm always going down on Belotti. I always feel like I'm not very nice about him, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not had a happy time since joining there, has he? It's been a long while since we've seen the best of the Rooster, Il Gallo, as he goes by. So the Champions League game is Milan-Tottenham. The Europa League games are Red Bull Salzburg against Roma, Juventus against Nantes, and in the Europa Conference League, we have Braga against Fiorentina and Lazio against Cluj. Obviously, amongst those, there's going to be by far the most focus on the Milan-Tottenham game. But having said that, I think that I'll be really interested to see how Roma approach that Salzburg game. I think that my expectation of Mourinho has always been that when he sees a chance to win a trophy, he'll go all for it. Because as we saw with the Conference League last season, he knows how to lean into those moments. But as I said, I think on the podcast quite recently, it's almost a tricky dilemma now, whether you've got a better chance of getting into the Champions League through the league or through the Europa League. And Salzburg are no pushovers. So this, I think, is one of those games where, just because it doesn't sound like a sort of high profile game, it could be a trap for Roma. So I'm really interested to see how that one goes. And Juventus, I would hope, given all of their travails at home, I would hope they're taking the Europa League quite seriously as a chance to do something this season. And I would hope that they've got more than enough to deal with Nantes.
Well, frankly speaking, if you have a club that, if you have the highest wages and salary, you should have a squad that's deep enough. You know, like Paredes should be able to do something in the Europa League. If he can't do it, then yeah.
We should do some shout outs to our Chronicles Tifosi. Mina, if you're up for splitting the list as always.
Yes.
We'll say thank you to Ahmed Hussein, Anthony David, and Sharif El Alam.
Ahmed Khalid, Dieter van Gucht, Lorenzo Saint-Dubois. But thank you all so much for joining us and listening to and being members of our Patreon. Let's see. That's all we have time for, but we'll be back midweek with some voice notes. Obviously, we'll come back to say something about what happens between, in the European competitions, really, not just Milan. I know we're heavily focusing on Milan because there are the representative in the Champions League this week. Next week, we'll see both Napoli and Inter. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini and at Mina Rzouki. Subscribe to Serie A Chronicles on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Producer Simon likes to use the abbreviations, but for somebody who's as old as I am, it takes me a really long time to figure out that it means Twitter and Instagram. But anyway, do let us know on why and what reasons you are for supporting the clubs that you support. Thank you to all those who already wrote to us. I'm sure we'll follow up on the rest of them too. So ciao for now and see you next week.
Bye.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.